In this lesson, we're going to work with Spring Security's PreFilter annotation. The PreFilter annotation allows us to filter collections that are passed into our methods as arguments. So to help us out with this lesson, I have created the Appointment Utils class, which is a bean, as we can see by the component annotation. Within the Appointment Utils class, there are two methods. The first is the Save All method, which accepts a collection of type list with a generic type of appointment as an argument. And what we do in the body of this method is we iterate through all of the appointments and we store the email address of the user associated with the appointment into a string builder, and then we simply spit that string builder out to a string and return that from our method. The second method is just a helper method to create an appointment. So we pass in a user, we instantiate a new appointment, and then we set the user field and return the appointment. So we're getting a real bare bones appointment. So we're going to use our appointment utils class as a bean within our appointment controller. So I'm just going to auto wire the appointment utils bean, and I'll give it a name of util within our appointment controller class. And now we're going to construct a method that we will use to test out the PreFilter annotation. It's a little bit contrived, but the PreFilter annotation admittedly is not used very heavily according to Spring's documentation. There's kind of an edge case for the use of this annotation. So let's start building out our method. It's going to return a string, and we'll call it test PreFilter, and then we're going to pass in an authentication object as an argument to this method, and we're going to add the response body annotation. So what we return from this method will be written directly to the browser, and now we're going to add a request mapping, and we're going to map it to the appointment/test URL. And now within this method, we're going to create an auto user, and it's going to be assigned the value of our principal, which we cast to an auto user. And then we're going to create a second auto user using the auto user constructor. And then we're going to set the email address, and we'll act like this is our attacker. Then next, we'll set the auto user ID. And I'm just going to set that to 100. So we created two users. The first we just pulled from our authentication object by getting the principal. So this is our currently logged in user. And then our second user we just created. And now we're going to invoke our util using the save all method. And we're going to pass in a new collection to this method that has a type of array list with a generic type of appointment. And then I'm just going to use the double brace constructor notation in order to be able to add items into that collection. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the util to create an appointment, and we'll pass in our regular user. And then we're going to use the util once again to create another appointment with the other user. So now we have a list that has two appointments within it, one that was created using our logged in user, and the other using this user that we have built within the body of our method. And they're being passed to our save all method on the appointment utils. So we're just going to save our appointment controller, and we'll run through this demonstration quick. I'm going to restart our server, and we can see what happens when we run through this scenario. So I'm going to sign in, and I'll sign in with our admin user, kbowersocks, with a password. From the appointments page, I'm just going to suffix the URL with /test, and there we see we get both email addresses. Now let's go back to our appointment utils class, and now we're going to add the PreFilter annotation. And this is going to help us filter out that collection being passed into the method. So we can use an expression, and we're going to reference the principal so we can access the currently logged in user. And we're going to check that each item within the collection that the user's auto user ID matches. So in order to reference the items in the collection, we use the filter object, and now we can access the properties on the filter object. And the filter object is pretty much always going to be the generic type. So the filter object is of type appointment, and we know the appointment has a user field on it, and the user has an auto user ID field. And we can just import the PreFilter annotation at this point. And we want to make sure that we use a capital F in PreFilter. And now we can run through our demonstration again. And this time we're going to filter out all of the items in the collection that are not owned by our logged in user. So let's just make sure we're able to run here with the server up. Okay, the server's up. And we'll hit that URL again. And now we see we only get the email address of our logged in user. And that's made possible by the PreFilter annotation, which allows us to filter collections within the Spring Security framework.